Hello and welcome to another Inspiring STEM webinar. Had a lot of fun with this the last couple of weeks, all about maths and careers and STEM and how it can actually affect you and your world and really what it's all about. Hi, anyway, so my name's Ben from Fizzics Education, and I'm really looking forward to this chat with a number of really interesting panelists who have had a really interesting career in STEM in lots of different ways. You'll get to meet them very, very soon, and certainly you'll be able to ask lots of questions. So if you haven't been in a Zoom webinar, look down the bottom. You'll see where it says Q&A. Q&A is question and answer, and you'll always be able to ask a question, and Jackie, who you'll be able to hear soon or meet very soon, will be able to help direct your questions to the different people throughout the session. Definitely so, and at the very end, we'll definitely open up the floor to lots and lots of questions. Just teachers, just as you sort of look at the panelists, just be aware there are lots of different people involved in this session. Please, ask your kids, ask the students, find out what they want to know, because this is the time that they get to ask. Definitely so. So just be aware that there are lots of people right across Australia, and I really am excited about this. And I just want to acknowledge all of our elders, past, present, and upcoming. Welcome to this webinar, and we are going to have a very good time. And if anyone's from Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander descent, you are certainly welcome to this session as well. Look, hey, we have a great session coming up. So our panelists today, it's quite a few different panelists. We'll have a look at the screen will come on up. Gives you a bit of an idea of the diversity of our people today. So I will read this out just for the recording as well. So you'll meet Ra Rice. He is from Amazon Web Services. He's a data center technician. Amazingly cool person. Very interesting world he lives in. Dr. Alex Thompson is heavily involved with the Deep Green Biotech Hub at the University of Technology, Sydney, and looking after many hundreds of students in the middle of their lectures right now. We have Henry Laws, who's a noise vibration harshness engineer. There's actually a thing like this, and you get to find out what that is actually about from the Ford Motor Company of Australia. You'll also get to meet Dr. Peter Kaub, who's a genetic pathology registrar from RCPA, which is the Royal College of Pathologists of Australasia, and Nathan Manuel might be able to join us later on. He's a performance analyst from the South Australian National Football League. Lots of people and a short amount of time. So we will get to meet each person for 5 minutes, and we had to hear about what they've gotten up to, how they've used STEM in their day-to-day lives, as well as what got them there in the first place. And it'll certainly be a really interesting chat. So again, want to remind you, look down the bottom, use that Q&A function. It definitely is the one that we're going to be able to communicate with, and we'll be able to get your questions straight to our people and be able to hear what they think. So without further ado, I think we should get kicked right off with this. So, right. So, before you get going, I might just quickly say this has been put on with Inspiring the Future Australia, and very proudly supported by Amazon Web Services, and that's exactly why Ra is talking first. Because guess what? He's from Amazon Web Services. Ra, what do you get up to?
Hi, everybody. My name's Ra, and I work as a data center technician at Amazon Web Services, or AWS, and it's my role to build and maintain the data centers that we have for our customers at AWS. So, Jackie, could you please play the video number 1?
No problem. Video number 1.
Yeah.
Coming up.
So first, these videos that I'm about to show here are what is a data center. So here's number 1. So a data center looks like this from the outside. It's just a secure building. It's not very obvious. It's very well protected. We have these buildings that are highly secure so we can secure our customers' resources. They're unmarked and there's cameras everywhere. So yeah, you wouldn't even know there was one in the area. Could you please play number 2?
No problem. Okay, video number 2.
Great. So the buildings all need heating and cooling and ventilation. And so we have all the systems around to support that. There are other roles that help to maintain a data center other than my role. And this keeps what we have inside the data center up and running, which is what we'll show you in the next video. So this next video will actually show the data halls. And inside the data halls, we have all the computer systems and networks, the servers that run, that actually, it's the heart of the data center. And it's my job to maintain these servers.
Sorry, Ra, give me a second.
Sure.
Zoom is sharing the wrong window. This happens sometimes.
So while we find that, just wondering, Ra, do you work in that data center where the video was just shown?
Yes. And here is the video of where I go to do my work. So in the heart of the data center, through all this security, we get scanned in, we have our badges, and here we are. This is a data hall. So a data hall looks like a big bunch of aisles full of servers and cables for the networking. And in all of these racks that you can see in this image, there are servers, which are basically like you might see a desktop computer, but stacked on its side and inside a big device that's quite like called a rack. And we pull out these servers, and they have components just like a computer. They have RAM, they have CPUs, and they need repairing and fixing every so often. So my job is to go in, find errors where there are errors, and to go in and replace those parts. That's just part of the role. Okay, so I'll continue on with that. Cool. Some of our customers that we have at AWS include Netflix, we have Amazon.com, and also Twitch. Those customers, they use these resources, these physical computing resources, to store their data, to process data, to store the data process, to run programs, software for our customers. So whenever you connect to, just say, Netflix over the internet to watch a movie, you actually contact the servers inside our data centers, and they send back that data to you so you can watch your movie. My journey to become a data center technician wasn't a typical one. In school, I did a lot of STEM classes. I did biology, physics, I did maths, and then a mix of other classes too. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do, and it was very hard for me because in year 10, I actually moved away from home, and so I was living on my own for a long time. So I didn't really have that family support either. So it wasn't really an option. So I ended up joining the army and doing a whole bunch of different things actually along my journey to become a data center technician. I experimented a lot with web design, did some music stuff, did some DJing, did some music production, a bit of design work, graphic design. I studied fashion. I lived in California for 2 years. I really kind of experimented to sort of figure out where I belonged, kind of figured out what I wanted to do. And I kind of, through that experimentation, I narrowed myself down into my role because I kind of decided I like design, I like technology, I'm dealing with software, but I also like the hardware. It's kind of fun. So that brought me into this role. So I ended up speaking to a recruiter who got me into an interview for a traineeship at AWS. And through doing some short courses to prepare for the role, I had the knowledge that it took to get the role. And so as a trainee, I went in 6 months later. After a lot of hard work and a lot of learning on the job, I got the full-time role, and now I'm a data center technician.
So I'm just going to quickly ask, as people sort of gather their thoughts around this, did you think
Sure.
you'd always work in a data center?
No, I had no idea that this existed. And I don't think a lot of people do. There's a lot of people, when people think technology or if they think STEM, they tend to think software. So they think a developer, programmer, someone who's going to work remotely and, you know, console in and do, maybe they're a cybersecurity analyst but a lot of people forget that there's physical hardware still that needs to be maintained and fixed and built that runs the internet and runs all of these services. So, and the cloud, because that's essentially what we're building, the cloud. The cloud is a physical thing. And so when you have physical things, they break down and they fall apart, and it's our job to maintain those. So I had no idea. And when they brought that role up, I thought, great, like it's a job where I can be physical and apply some physical technician skills as well as mental, when you can use like software skills, analytical skills. It's a combination. It's like this weird area in the tech industry.
Oh, fantastic. Look, now here's the thing. We are going to have, I know people sort of gathering their thoughts around questions right now. And by the way, if you're listening on in, don't forget that Ra went first as a data center technician. So when we get at the end, don't forget that his background in design is certainly an interesting thing. Just out of interest, how do you find design in your world with what you have to do? How does that sort of link together?
I would say there is a lot of design work involved in building, because the data centers, as you saw in the video, there's a structure to it. They look like aisles, and there's a lot of servers, there's cabling that needs to be done, and that needs to be designed. And when you turn up, you think, okay, everything's already in place. We already have this system. But after a while, you realize the system's not perfect, and you can design a better one. And so if you have that design mind, then you can go, oh, I can see that this process could be improved. You can actually apply that design skill and come up with new ways to do something that could improve an entire company or save millions of dollars within a company. And it could be very simple. It could just be maybe you save 1 meter of cable for every single server in the data center. You multiply that by all of the data centers around the world, and you've saved millions of dollars. So design thinking like that really helps me along the way here.
Yeah, it's amazing what happens at scale. When you start
Exactly.
looking, we're talking global, scale matters. And obviously what you're doing with the data centers makes a huge difference, and especially people are interacting with AWS for sure. Hey, thank you very much, Ra. Please hang on, because there'll be definitely some questions to ask for sure. I'd love to actually speak also too with Dr. Alex Thomas, who's Thompson's right. Dear oh dear, you can tell us Thursday afternoon. Dear oh dear. Alex Thompson, please tell us, what do you get up to?
Hi, so my name's Dr. Alex Thompson. I am a marine biogeochemist and ecologist, and I use science to help businesses become more sustainable or develop new products that might help with things like climate change. So I have, just like Ra, a little bit of a funny kind of entry into the career that I currently have. When I was in school, I really, really liked science. I did biology and chemistry. I can't say I did particularly well in all of those subjects, but what I was really passionate about was that I knew that I really liked science. But I didn't know that there were that many careers out there aside from medicine and kind of sort of like health-related sort of science fields. So I went away to uni and I started studying kind of like a medical science degree, and I realized very, very quickly that the people around me were really passionate about it. I hated it. And I could see that the people that were passionate were doing really, really well, but it wasn't there for me. And so I stepped into a lecture and climate change and the effect of the animals of North America, and how he was working to help some of the communities there that were at risk of dying out because of climate change. And my mind was just like completely blown. And I thought, yeah, okay, this is it. I'm going to bring, I think this is what I want to do. So I is completely not uncommon, and working universities now to uni and completely change their degrees, and started studying environmental science. And then I did some honours in environmental science, which took me snorkeling around Port Phillip Bay in 9-degree water and being out in the middle of nowhere with sharks bumping up against my legs as I tried to dive and collect seagrass samples. And then I did a PhD in marine biogeochemistry, so looking at how some of our coastal environments, so places like wetlands and seagrasses and mangroves, can store massive amounts of carbon, and how we can work to conserve those environments so that everything that interacts with them helps to conserve carbon. So it's a little bit kind of funny, but when we look at an environment like that, we might think, oh yeah, it's either doing one thing or it's not, but actually everything has an impact on that environment. And I looked at how animals that live in those types of environment can actually affect its ability to store carbon. And so I finished my PhD and thought, okay, this is it. I'm going to change the world. And then realized that I was way too impatient and I needed things to happen much faster. And so I decided to start working with businesses, small businesses and startups, and take the research that was being developed within the research institute that I worked in, and help those small businesses to basically turn that into products and services, so that that research could be translated really, really quickly and people could start doing stuff with it. So specifically, I work in a field called Algae Biotechnology, which is where I work for the Genome Biotech Hub, and we help businesses work with algae. Jackie, I'm just going to throw up a slide really quickly, if I can share my screen. Here we go. Okay. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yeah, so I work with algae. So algae can be the seaweed, the kelp, and the things that you see washed up on the beach, or it can also be microalgae, which are these tiny little single cells, which are basically an entire plant is a cell. And it's really an amazing plant. Our entire Earth was formed because of algae. We got oxygen and developed an atmosphere, and animals and plants were able to evolve because algae started evolving on our planet billions of years ago. And it's still around today, which when you think about it is pretty amazing. It's older than the dinosaurs. And in fact, most of our fossil fuels are actually made from compressed microalgae that is billions and billions of years old. And so it has all these amazing things that it can do. And just in our Earth, it already produces somewhere between 50 and 80% of total oxygen on our planet. It also has some really important components in it, which means that it's useful in making things like pigments for food. We can dye clothes with it. We can turn it into food that we can eat. We can turn it into things like fish oil tablets. We can make fertilizers. We can make compostable plastics. Funnily enough, Kanye West releasing a line of shoes made of algae. So it's a really, really exciting place to work. And on the left here is one of the businesses that we work with. It's a brewery that is actually capturing their carbon and turning it into algae. So rather than contributing to climate change, it's actually helping to capture carbon and then turn that into something that we can use, which is really, really, it's an amazing space to be working in because it feels like we're really making a difference in terms of really big global issues like climate change, food security, water security, and even things like making sure that we optimize the amount of space we're using in cities and grow plants in places to produce more oxygen.
I'm just looking at that, just thinking that slide with so many different avenues for algae. Your inbox must get a lot of interesting inquiries. So
Yes.
so what sort of projects are you working on? I've been working on for the last year or two like that. I mean, obviously you've got lots of them to work with. I mean, what are some that go, you know what, that is just awesome. I can't wait to see its impact.
So some of the coolest things that we've worked on in the past little while, I mean, capturing carbon with algae is really, really awesome. And it's something that people are really excited about because I think especially after we see such big environmental disasters like the bushfires that we just had, we really do kind of feel the impacts of climate change on ourselves. And so people are always wanting to go, okay, so what can I do as a business or as a person to help with this big problem? And helping someone like that, you know, let's capture your carbon so we can actually use it rather than putting it into the atmosphere and making it contribute to climate change is really great. But then there's been some really kind of amazing things that we've done. We worked with a seaweed company on the South Coast and they've developed some food made out of seaweed, and then they started selling their seaweed to make bath bombs for Lush. We started working with a startup who developed a way to dye clothes using a pigment extracted from algae. So normally a lot of clothes are dyed using synthetic or petrochemical based products. So, you know, if we're thinking environmentally, a lot of those aren't super great, but actually being able to dye them with algae is really, really sustainable. And we've seen some really kind of cool foods. I was in America about 12 months ago and someone had made vegan sushi where the salmon was made entirely out of algae, which when you think of it makes sense because when a salmon's in the ocean, that's what it's eating is algae. But rather than fishing, let's just grow the algae and just make a salmon out of algae.
Which is wild. And by the way, I mean, people listening in, there's certainly a massive economy growing with this sort of thing. Hey, Jackie, I just saw there's a question that's come up.
Yes, there's a question specifically for Alex, so we thought we'd ask you this right now. What does the brewery do with the algae once they catch the carbon in it?
So that's something we're working on with them at the moment is the most suitable thing to use that algae. So hopefully we'll have an answer for you in the next year, but it should be pretty exciting.
I'm going to throw a quick question because, I mean, obviously, I mean, you're massively into science in lots of ways. And by the way, snorkeling, gee, that's a tough life. But there is also the research side. We can't just sort of swim around and have a look around. You've got research to do, so which means involve I imagine a fair bit of maths. I mean, how often are you dealing with maths on a week-to-week or day-to-day or month-to-month basis?
A lot. So that project that I just talked about, where we were helping to capture the carbon that's in the brewery and then make with algae, we used maths just to help, translate what that research impact was back to the brewery, and then they then used it to translate it back to the media and the people that they were talking to in terms of investment. So science isn't all just in a lab looking down a microscope. In fact, I don't even know the last time that I did that. Although I do go in labs most days, it's usually a lot of talking to people, giving presentations and doing things like that, like saying, okay, so we're capturing this much carbon in this big vat of bubbling green algae. That's about equivalent to, if you were to lay this much carbon out, but how much oxygen you're producing is equivalent to a hectare of bush. So if you have more of these, it's multiple hectares of bush, which to people makes a lot more sense. I also do a lot of teaching, a lot of undergraduates teaching environmental science, and maths is used every day when we teach. It's a lot of things like working out, if you have this many kangaroos on Mount Panorama and they're breeding at this rate, how many can you expect in 2 years? How many trees are there? And so how much oxygen is being produced and how much food is there for all the animals that are utilizing that area? What's the most effective way that we can conserve and protect that environment? We use mathematical models to do a lot of that. Modeling is a massive part of science, and it's a field that is growing massively, and having some insight and some use of maths in that space is hugely beneficial in science.
Absolutely, and also making sense of those numbers. I can remember as an undergraduate student trying to work out mark and recapture, and honestly, every now and then the maths would say we had infinite number of koalas, and that would be a problem because it's not actually the case. So making that maths make sense is important. Hey, thank you so much, Alex, and please hang around. I'm sure there'll be more questions coming through. Hey, Henry Laws, you've got a very interesting world, I must say. I mean, I sort of thought this would exist, but now I actually met someone who does a very unique job for Ford Motoring Australia. So please tell me, Henry, what do you do?
Thanks, Ben. So my job is I work at Ford down in Geelong, and specifically I work in a department called noise, vibration and harshness. But there's a lot of different areas in this department, and so I get the best job title, which is squeak and rattle engineer. And it really is exactly what it says in the title. I drive a lot of vehicles around the test tracks that we have down in Geelong, listening for squeaks and rattles as a customer. So things like if your seat's squeaking or you press a button and the plastic is buzzing, anything like that, it's my job to eliminate those noises out of the vehicle. Now, Jackie, if you could share the video, please.
No problem.
So this is the rig that I use. It basically simulates everything that we do on the track. So we have tracks with lots of bumps and dips and creaks and everything. And it basically simulates what customers would see. So this is what we have. This is a rig that we use to shake the vehicle around, because when we're driving the car, there might be a buzz or a squeak in the back of the car, which we can't look at when we're in the car. So on the track, we find this issue, and then we take it into this 4-poster, which we then use to find the vehicle shaking around like it is on the road, and we're right underneath the car we're pressing tubes and tires and springs and everything, trying to turn off noises and find out exactly what the problem is. And in that chamber, we test all the way from 50 degrees Celsius down to -40. So you never want to find an issue in the cold, because things get very painful very quickly. Now, I've always been interested in working with vehicles from a young age. I've loved cars. I first worked on a car when I was 8 years old, and my dad taught me everything. And because of that, I always wanted to have a career working with vehicles and cars. But the road to getting there was not easy for me. very academically average. I've never been a star student when it comes to grades, but I always loved doing this. So from an early age, I always tried to get as much experience as possible. When I was in my teenage years, while I was at secondary school, I worked in as many companies that did car things. Like I did 2 weeks in an exhaust design and manufacture center, as well as I worked in a casting factory, which didn't necessarily have anything to do with working with vehicles, but I found that down the line, knowing as much about these processes as possible, it showed just as much merit as my academic grades. So I feel that without the experience I gained through working in companies that did engineering, I don't think I'd be where I am at this time. And I always knew I needed to go to university to do what I needed to do. But as a boy from England, I always tried to excel there. But with the grades that I had, I wasn't able to study in England, so I moved here to Australia. But because of what I had to do and how I had to pay for it, I had to do it all myself. So I took a year out after high school to work as a white van man in a vending machine company, because I needed to pay for my move here, because things are awfully expensive doing that. So I took a year out to work, and I gained a lot of independence doing that. And I think it really helped me now, because that was my first real full-time job, a job that was not even remotely related to what I do now. I think that really set me up as independent and self-sufficient.
Absolutely. I just got to ask just quickly, the studies, like obviously you got to do engineering to become an engineer. I mean, how much did your studies meet with the real world of working in, well, really acoustics? And how does it gel? Are you sort of found a completely different pathway that doesn't represent the degree? Like, I'm just trying to get my headspace of it, what it's like, degree versus real life.
So for me personally, my job that I do is, there's a lot of jobs within my own department that revolve a lot around software and physics, and sound analysis. But my specific job, because of the nature of it, it's finding very particular issues in very particular places that a computer would never be able to pick up. My job is specifically related to, say, material compatibility. So I need to be able to visualize what happens when a piece of rubber rubs against a piece of metal. You're going to get a squeak, especially if it's wet. Now that is something that I learned in university, but things like the hard physics and the calculus and everything that I learned in university, I wouldn't say that it wasn't useful to me. It absolutely is, but I didn't necessarily find it's not essential to the role that I currently play. But if I had to do it again, I would still want to excel in those departments, in those subjects, because engineering is a very, very broad discipline, and you never know. I'm not going to be doing this forever. I'm probably going to go to a different role, and those subjects will, I'm sure, come in very handy to me later on.
Well, certainly the applications of our waves through buildings and all sorts of structures make a difference, especially if they get to stand up through earthquakes and whatnot. That makes a difference. I've got to ask a facetious question. And when you sit in your own car or your friend's car, can you go, you know what, I know it's in the front right-hand corner and it's this thing?
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. And I have to tell you, no one really wants me in their car anymore, because people don't tend to actually listen for the issues unless it's a big issue. But as soon as someone points it out, they hate you for it, because they can't stop hearing it.
Absolutely. And I imagine, working with Ford, they don't have one car, they've got a lot of cars. And if the problem gets rolled out en masse, it's kind of hard to deal with that as a recall, I'd imagine.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And you know, we don't just jump in a car. I like to advertise the very glamorous part of my job, which is jumping in cars at the test track, being flown overseas to all the plants in China, Thailand, South Africa, India, and sorting issues there. But that's really the end of the line. It's years of work before that. You know, we have virtual models of vehicles on our computers that we all look at and scrutinize, so that only the worst issues get out into an actual vehicle. So there's a lot of preparation and work that goes into getting rid of these noises before they actually get into a car.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting that you mentioned modeling, because that's exactly what Alex talked about in regards to modeling is a thing. And the two steps, so algae and cars actually do have a link, which is fantastic. And I didn't realize, but of course, the modeling is really a thing. And again, people listening in, look down the bottom. The Q&A function is definitely there. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along. But look, thank you very much, Henry, for letting me know a bit about what a rattle and squeak person does.
Thank you.
It's fantastic. Look, I'd love to have a chat also too with Peter Kaub, who is very much a separate from our rattle and squeak engineering. I mean, certainly in his world, if you're rattle and squeaking, that's really bad, I suppose. Peter, tell us, what do you get up to?
Hi, Ben. Yeah, I'm a doctor, and I use genetic testing technologies to try and diagnose disease. Just to go back one step, though, I have a bit of a crossover with a couple of your other guests. I started out well before medicine in biotechnology, which is a bit of a mix of basic biology, engineering, and maths. And also what I do now relies on very, very big data. And so we use services like Amazon Cloud and some of the computing services in that area. What I wanted to do today, though, is just give you an idea about that even in medicine, everything is underpinned by STEM and maths. So if I, hang on, try and share my screen, and there we go. Right, so I just wanted to give you a bit of an idea about what I do, one of the things I do, and that's genomics. And that is really looking at all of your genetic blueprint in an individual. And so really though, genomics, it's about scale. And so what I mean by that is that we are using, hang on, let's get the next slide. We're using really, really big numbers and really, really small numbers. So for example, the number here, 3.2 billion, is the number of data points, if you like, that you get in your genes from one parent. And the small number here, that is how much DNA, 12 picomoles, or that many zeros and 1, 2 moles of DNA to actually sequence all of the genetic information in one individual. So just to go back one step, the human genome in all of us, we get from both of our parents. In most of our cells, we have DNA, which is like the blueprint for our cells. It's what makes us similar to our parents and our siblings, but also what makes us unique as individuals. Now, as I mentioned, we get 3.2 billion chemical letters from each of our parents. Those chemical letters are represented by A, T, C, and G. And so we have 6.4 billion total letters in our blueprint. And to give you some context, in the Guinness World Records, Book of World Records, the 20th century longest novel was written in 1912 by Marcel Proust, with over 9 million characters and across 13 volumes. And our genome has 6.4 billion data points, or characters if you like, and that's 666 times bigger than that largest novel. What do we do? Well, we use machines, sort of robotic-like machines, to sequence all of those bits of data. How we do that is we break it up into smaller fragments. We then amplify each letter 20 to 100 times to make sure that we're getting the same letter each time for each of the data points. We then read fluorescent dot colors to help us determine which of the letters. And then, just like lining up all the pieces of a very, 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 very big jigsaw puzzle, we take all those fragments that we sequence and we line them up together to see if there are any problems. Sometimes in all of those 6.4 billion letters, one single letter can cause quite debilitating disease. And so sometimes we're not just looking for a needle in a haystack, we're actually looking for a needle in a needle stack, because all these letters look so similar, and trying to work out which is the one causing a problem and matching it up to show that it's causing a problem can be quite difficult. Now that requires a lot of data processing and a lot of maths. And as I said, lots of big numbers and lots of small numbers. And just to give you an example, a very quick example, not of a patient of mine, but I know the treating doctors and the scientists look at this. This can be helpful in a situation like this young girl, Ariana. When she was 8 months old, she went into intensive care because she started experiencing seizures, stopping breathing, and she started to lose the development that she had in her brain and the skills she was acquiring. Genomic sequence found one change that meant that she wasn't able to transport a vitamin around her body, riboflavin, vitamin B2. Finding that meant that she could be treated by just having a simple daily dose of riboflavin, and now she has a normal life again. So in what I do, there's lots of teamwork and lots of maths. We have scientists that do lots of things with getting the DNA together. We have what are called bioinformaticians, which are like computer scientists and programmers for this particular field. And they're looking at one individual's information is the same as all the data on 2 4K Blu-ray discs of characters. Then we have the scientists, people like myself, pathologists and other medical specialists. We use databases and probability to try and work out if any of these letter changes are actually meaningful for a patient's health and whether we can do anything about it. And then also to keep all of this data, we have database managers that need high-end computing and big amounts of databases to store this. I saw a talk yesterday by one of the biggest databases, one of the founders of the biggest databases in the world, and that has over 71,000 individuals' genomes, and that has 8 petabytes of data. That's 8 quadrillion single letters, or 8 quadrillion bytes, or 64 billion quadrillion. I'm mixing it. The numbers are so big, I'm mixing myself up here. So 8 quadrillion bytes of data, or 64 quadrillion single character bits of data. So everything I do for patients is underpinned by maths, computing, and STEM. And if you want to get involved in genetics revolution, bit of an ad here, there'll be many, many roles, jobs, and career paths for years to come. And if you're interested at all, this genomicsinfo.org.au is a good starting place. So that's.
No, absolutely. I mean, I actually just thinking just then, I only just read some research, well, not so much the research, but at least the media article regarding around how some of the supercomputers are being used right now to work out this virus that's been going around a bit. It's somewhat of a thing to crunch. I mean, trying to work out, I mean, linking computers and DNA is quite a process. I mean, how often do you deal mainly with computers as opposed to extracting the DNA and, you know, replicating it, what side of the world are you mainly in the data side or on the other side?
Well, I'm mostly on the data side. Well, I'm sort of in between the lab and the other doctors, if you like, and sometimes the patients, in trying to explain what all the information actually might mean, because it is incredibly complex and there is a lot of information there. And also sometimes explaining what it can't do as well, because sometimes we can't get answers to certain diseases in this way. So I'm more on the data side and if you like, explaining that and putting that into terms that other doctors and patients can understand.
So there's some, I mean, this sort of picking on a particular certain disease, I just don't know. There are some diseases that are genetic, you know, have a genetic basis whereby, you know what, the letters can change a lot and not much happens, or is that happen a lot, or is it mainly, hey, you change one thing and suddenly the expressions, it goes off the rails?
Well, the thing about it is that because we have so many genes and so many data points, is sometimes a change that in one circumstance can be very, very bad. In other circumstances, there might be other genes that protect that and don't cause a problem. And so in just the process of us developing as a young embryo, there are little copying errors that occur, and we all are born with some of those changes that potentially could cause disease. It's just a matter of working out in the context of everything else in what's going on in all our genes as to whether they do cause a problem or not. And so that's why it's not just big data. It's actually, and it's not just saying this one thing causes a problem all the time. It's looking at all of the data around the patient and how they present and what problems they're having, and then trying to match that up with the data to see if it explains it and whether we can direct to some way of treating it with medicines with the information we get.
Thank you. And again, those people listening in, there's a career path. Totally. You can totally use data sets in a lot of ways, as you heard through all of our speakers, but this is certainly an area that can improve human health, and why not get involved? Hey, we have got a couple of questions for across the panel, I believe. So, Jackie, what's one of them for us?
Since you've asked so nicely, thank you, Ben. Adam has a question for Henry. Henry, your job working with cars is really cool. Do you think you can work with planes in the future too?
Yeah, why not? Definitely. Maybe not even specifically related to what I do now. Like I was saying, I did a degree that allows me to do, I studied everything that allows me to do everything that you would want to do in the aeronautical industry. I think I might even do that one day. I love aerospace work. I love planes and rockets and all those sorts of things. And if I had the opportunity, I'd probably do it. Yeah.
Can you make me a car that flies, like a car-plane hybrid? I'd really like that. Thanks.
I could do that, but I wouldn't have my career if that was the case. I'd be a millionaire by now.
Thank you for that, Henry. There was a second question for you from Ben. Is there someone at Ford whose job it is to make cars make more noise, like louder revving?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's probably a better job than even mine. So it really depends on the car that you're talking about. So if you own a Mustang, say, you want that Mustang to be loud. So there's people in my department who work specifically to tune the noise of the engine to what people want. But on the flip side, there's also people who tune engines to have no noise. So in a little city car, say, nobody wants to really hear the engine. So it really depends on what the car is and what people really want from it.
Cool. Thanks for that, Henry. We have a question for Peter and Alex. So I might start with Peter, if that's all right. Peter, genetics are really cool and interesting, but I'm not very good at maths. Are there genetic jobs where you don't need so much maths?
That's all of the jobs require some maths, but the thing is that you can always learn more using the tools. So a lot of that really complex mathematics is even beyond me, but the whole thing is that we work in massive teams. So there are many, many different jobs, from the scientists in the lab processing the DNA and doing the tests to the programmers. For example, I know one guy who's an amazing coder, and he has produced software that is used across Australia now for this type of work, and will be rolled out internationally soon. And he didn't even go to university. He's just an amazing coder, and he's able to take these ideas and turn them into code. So you do need maths, but don't be scared by maths. When you actually use it in the real world, and when you start using the tools, even complex maths can become easier. And some of the people that you work with, they may be strong in one area, and you go to them for that, and you use their skills, and you use your own skills in the area that you can. So don't be discouraged. Look at what you can do, and look at all of the tools out there, because nobody understands all of the maths of genetics. There's no way that you possibly could. It has to be done in teams, and we need people from very many diverse areas to bring lots of different skills to the problems that we have in genetics.
Thank you very much, Peter. And the next question was for Alex. And Russell asks, algae is really cool. Is it hard to grow at home to increase oxygen in the house?
So you've probably already got algae in your home and don't even know about it. If you have a fish tank or if you have a swimming pool, probably algae is one of the things that you're trying to get rid of. But there's other really cool places that you can find algae. So if you have a backyard and you've got something called lichen that might be growing on a tree stump or under a rock, quite often lichen is actually a symbiotic relationship between a fungi and an algae. So you can find algae that's kind of living there. So lots of people will grow lichens as like a houseplant sort of thing. So that's one way you can do it. There aren't a lot of places that you can go and buy algae and just start growing it. But that's changing really quickly. There's a startup that I work with called Eukaryote, and I dropped the link in the answer to the question. They make TikToks about growing algae in your own home, and they have kits that you can grow algae. So they're just a student group that's just trying to gather some information on how people like interacting with algae and whether people are wanting to get basically growing in their own home as well. So there's some places that you can get it, but they also just make really cool TikToks if you're wanting to get some science in TikTok scrolling.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. I mean, I personally would also like to grow algae in my house because I like to eat seaweed for salads and for sushi and stuff. In fact, I think a friend of mine told me that ice cream has algae in it, and I didn't know that. I don't know whether
almond milk. If you eat blue Smarties, it has a blue pigment from algae in it.
Smarties? I did not know that. Wow. Well, thank you very much. Alex, back to you, Ben.
Yeah, and I just noticed there was another question that came up which said, it's on the algae again too. My mum makes me take fish oil tablets because I don't eat fish. So could I eat algae instead and get the same vitamins and stuff?
So fish actually get the omega-3 that is in your fish oil tablets, which is why most people take fish oil tablets from eating algae in the ocean. So really they're just getting their omega-3 from algae, and so we eat the fish so we can get the same omega-3 that comes from algae. So people are starting to develop omega-3 tablets that actually just come straight from algae rather than having the fish that is the middleman. So they are starting to become more available, and especially for people that don't like eating fish or can't eat fish, it's definitely a good alternative because you kind of just cut out that process in the middle of the fish eating the algae and then you eating the fish oil tablets.
Awesome. And by the way, if you've been listening in, do not freak out about your ice cream. It tastes just as good and always has. It's in there. It totally works a treat. Hey, what I noticed about everyone talking about this is that you're not working in isolation at all. I mean, I just wanted to flip back to Ra, who spoke at the start regarding the data center. I mean, how many people are working with you to look after a place like that?
It depends, but in our larger data centers, we can have, let's see, 50 plus. Like there are data centers overseas that have hundreds of people in there moving those racks that you saw, moving 80 of those in a day. So they grow really quickly. Everybody works in the team. And just as Peter said, when you're in industry, it's not you on your own. You will always have experts. And that's why it's really important to follow your interests and find something that you enjoy, because you can bring that to the team. Like I'm a part of the data center technician team, and the thing that I bring to the team is, I would say, I'm a bit more extroverted than the rest of the team. A lot of the programmers and the guys that are a bit more quiet, they're really good with technical skills, and I'm not so good with technical skills. I'm better with communication. So I'll bring that to the table when it comes to the team. If someone has a program that they create and they need to get it out there and to sort of say, hey, this is a really great idea, I'll go and say, okay, I'll help you write an email up. I can get this information out there for you. And if I need something like, I'm not too sure how to program this, can you please help me out? We have members for that. So data halls, yeah, data centers, they're full of different people from all different job roles. Data center technicians, we have engineers taking care of the heating, ventilation, cooling. We have security, we have data analysts that work remotely, that work with the services, with the customers. Yeah, it's pretty full on.
Awesome. Now, a couple of questions just popped up. Alex, you're getting picked on, so there are two of these, just finish quickly. Firstly, I might go to this one first. Could algae be passed on for use in other industries, linking them together?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's lots of ways that we integrate algae into something called circular systems. So for instance, we might work with a company that has a wastewater cleaner. It just might be that they clean out their factory with water, and the water they collect from that isn't particularly nice. They can't just kind of put it in the garden. And you can use algae a bit like a filter, and you can kind of gather up all of those things that might be in the water that might not be very great. And so then you get water on the other end. And then that algae that's then grown with the compounds in it that aren't super great can then be gone on and processed and turned into something else. So it might be turned into something like a compostable plastic. In instances like the one that I described where we can use algae to capture carbon that comes out of a brewery, the algae that's then grown can be used to feed things like chickens or fish. We can also turn that into a compostable plastic, or there's even companies overseas that turn it into like a foam for backpacks and things like shoes and surfboards. So it can be really kind of useful to use in different stages. And once we also grow an algae from, it might be from a waste source or something like that, we can also then extract different compounds of that and use it in different ways. It's something that the researchers that I work with are really trying to drive, because we don't want there to be any waste in the systems that we work in. In fact, waste shouldn't be waste. It should be something that we value and that we can just try and use in a different way.
Awesome, and thanks very much. I will ask the very last final question. It's going to get back to you, Alex. But look, much appreciated for all of our panel, and thank you for those people who've been in throughout the entire session. Very much appreciated. Adrian, Russell would just like to know: do you grow your own kombucha?
I don't know.
Okay, you got your project now. Fantastic. And actually, you know what I mean, you have this ability. Everyone listening in have the abilities to do this. Just make sure you sort of following the correct processes so it's all nice and hygienic, safe, and everything else. Look, hey, thank you very much for joining us in this session. This has been the Inspiring STEM webinar series, the Maths and Career Programs, which is all about really looking at how you can apply maths and STEM in potentially future careers or even a career now. So thank you very much for Amazon Web Services for supporting this. And this has been produced in association with Inspiring the Future Australia. And look, thank you very much for coming along, all of you on the panel. And I hope you all have a fantastic afternoon. And I'm signing off. I'm Ben from Fizzics Education. Thank you, and we'll catch you another time.